The drone was not supposed to be flying toward the Queen. I noticed it before anyone else did, and by the time I moved, my heart was already pounding harder than it had in years. My name is Daniel Whitmore, and 3 days earlier, I had been cleaning waste pipes on Vesk Station, a massive orbital hub run by an alien species called the Vesk. I was one of a few hundred humans working there, on short contracts, doing the jobs nobody else wanted. Nobody looked at us twice. Nobody expected anything from us. That was exactly how the Vesk liked it. Then the Queen of the Second Hive, a powerful ruler named Ithrasa, walked into the maintenance bay where I was working, looked straight at me, and declared that I would become her new personal bodyguard. The entire room went silent, and then everyone laughed. Her own advisors laughed. The guards standing near her laughed the hardest. To them, choosing a human, a soft, weak, short-lived species, to protect the most important person in the entire hive, was the funniest thing they had heard in years. I laughed too, quietly, because I understood exactly what she was doing. The Queen had already lost 3 bodyguards in the past year. All of them were elite Vesk warriors, bred and trained since birth for combat, wrapped in armor that could stop a plasma round. All 3 had died anyway, killed by enemies who knew exactly how strong Vesk warriors were and planned around it. Nobody had ever planned around a human. That was the joke. That was also, I would soon learn, exactly the point. I did not tell anyone about my past. Nobody asked, and I saw no reason to explain that I had spent 11 years serving in a human defense unit, fighting in conflicts most people in this part of the galaxy had never heard of. I had been trained to notice small details, to read a room, to sense when something was wrong before my mind even understood why. I had been trained to survive when the odds were completely against me. The Vesk saw a small, fragile creature wearing an oversized uniform. They had no idea what was underneath it. 2 nights after I was given the title Chevelle, meaning the Queen's Jest, I stood behind her chair at a grand banquet called the Silk Accord. It was a gathering meant to end old conflicts between rival hive families. The Queen sat between 2 powerful matrons, each one smiling with too many teeth, each one wanting her removed from power for their own reasons. The hall was filled with soft music, glowing lanterns, and the quiet clicking sounds the Vesk made when they spoke among themselves. Servants floated between tables on small maintenance drones, delivering food and drink. Everything looked calm. Everything looked normal. Except for one drone. I had spent 2 days studying how the station's service drones moved, because that was the kind of thing my training told me to do. Watch the patterns. Learn the normal, so you can spot the moment something breaks from it. This drone was not following its normal path. Instead of gliding toward the food tables, it was curving directly toward the Queen, moving with a smoothness that had nothing to do with delivering meals. I did not shout. I did not hesitate. I moved. I stepped between the Queen and the drone at the exact moment it detonated, with a burst of light and force that knocked several nearby guests to the floor. My uniform jacket, reinforced with hidden plating I had quietly requested from the station armory, took most of the impact. My ears rang, and my vision blurred for a moment, but I stayed standing. Screaming filled the hall. Guards who had spent the entire evening watching the doors finally turned around, confused, too slow to understand what had just happened. I was already moving toward the second threat, because in my experience, one attack rarely comes alone. A member of one matron's honor guard, a Vesk warrior nearly twice my size, was pushing through the panicking crowd, heading straight for the Queen with a blade drawn from beneath his ceremonial robes. I intercepted him before he crossed halfway across the room. He was strong, faster than expected, and clearly trained for direct combat, but he had spent his entire life fighting other warriors who followed the same rules he did. I had spent years fighting in situations with no rules at all. I used his own momentum against him, redirecting his charge into a nearby pillar, then secured his weapon arm before he could recover his balance. Within seconds, he was on the ground, unable to move, completely restrained. The entire exchange lasted less time than it takes to describe it. I turned just in time to see the third figure, someone I had not expected, standing near the private exit behind the Queen's throne. This one was different from the others. He was calm, controlled, watching the chaos with the patience of someone who had planned every part of this evening in advance. He was the real threat. The drone and the warrior had been distractions, meant to draw attention and open a path toward the queen. He moved fast, faster than the warrior before him, closing the distance toward the throne with practiced precision. I reached him just as he raised his weapon, and for a brief moment, everything around us seemed to slow down. I grabbed a heavy metal decanter from a nearby table and threw it directly into his path, disrupting his aim just long enough for me to close the gap. What followed was not elegant. It was not the kind of fight shown in old stories about brave warriors facing each other with honor. It was quick, practical, and over almost as soon as it began. I disarmed him, forced him to the ground, and held him there until station security finally arrived, far too late to have actually stopped anything. The hall remained frozen in stunned silence. Guests who had laughed at me 2 nights earlier now stared at me with wide, unreadable eyes. The queen sat perfectly still in her chair, watching everything unfold with an expression I could not read. Later, in a private medical chamber, she came to see me herself. I had several small injuries, nothing serious, mostly bruises, and a few cuts from flying debris. She sat beside my bed, all 6 of her eyes fixed directly on me, studying me the way someone studies a puzzle they thought they had already solved. "You are not simple maintenance staff," she said. "No, Your Highness," I answered. "You allowed everyone to believe that you were." "Nobody asked otherwise," I said. She made a low, rattling sound that I would later learn was something close to laughter, though there was nothing amused about it this time. "I chose you because I believed you would be harmless," she said. "I wanted my enemies to underestimate the protection around me while they focused on more obvious threats. I did not expect the joke to actually have strength behind it." "With respect, Your Highness," I said, "that is somewhat the story of my entire species." She studied me a long moment, and I noticed something shift in her expression, something between surprise and quiet respect. "The title remains," she finally said, "Chevelle, but perhaps it no longer means what everyone believes it means." I said nothing, because I understood something she was only beginning to realize. Let the rest of the galaxy continue believing it was still a joke. Let the next enemy underestimate me, the same way the last 3 had. That mistake was the greatest advantage I had. Word of what happened at the banquet spread through the station within a single day. By the following morning, the mood around me had changed completely. Guards who once ignored me now stepped aside when I walked past. Servants who once treated me like an amusing curiosity now avoided meeting my eyes entirely. I had gone from being an insult to being a mystery, and mysteries made people nervous. The Queen requested a private meeting with me in her personal quarters, a large chamber overlooking the vast curve of the station's outer ring. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass, calm and distant, completely unaware of the danger that had almost changed everything the night before. "Tell me the truth," she said, once the doors had sealed behind us. "Who trained you?" I told her about my years of service, about the conflicts I had lived through, about the kind of training that teaches a person to notice threats long before anyone else in the room does. She listened without interrupting, her eyes never leaving mine. "Your people are not as weak as we assumed," she finally said. "We are not weak," I said. "We are simply underestimated. Most species judge us by size and by how short our lives are. They forget that a short life spent learning to survive teaches lessons that longer, safer lives never do." She rose from her seat and walked toward the wide window, staring out at the stars in silence for a long moment. "The attack last night was not random," she said. "It was planned by someone within my own court, someone who believed removing me now, during the Silk Accord, would create enough confusion to seize control before the succession laws could stop them." "Do you know who?" I asked. "I have suspicions," she said. "But suspicion is not proof, and accusing a powerful matron without solid evidence could ignite a conflict far larger than a single attempted attack." "Then we need evidence," I said. She turned to look at me, something like curiosity returning to her expression. "We," she repeated. "I am your bodyguard," I said. "Protecting you means understanding the danger around you, not just reacting to it after it appears." She studied me for a long moment, before finally nodding. "Very well, Chevelle," she said. "Let us find the truth together." Over the following days, I worked closely with a small group of station investigators, reviewing security footage, movement logs, and supply records tied to the maintenance drones used during the banquet. It was slow, careful work, the kind that required patience rather than force. I noticed something the Vesk investigators had overlooked, a small gap in the drone maintenance records from 3 days before the attack, a window during which one drone had been taken offline for what was listed as a routine inspection. I traced the inspection request back to a technician who worked directly under the household of one of the 2 matrons who had been seated beside the Queen that night. It was a small detail, easy to miss, but it was enough to begin pulling a much larger thread. The Queen brought the evidence before the full Hive Council, 3 days later. I stood quietly behind her throne as she calmly laid out everything we had discovered, piece by piece, without raising her voice, without making a single accusation she could not support. The matron in question tried to dismiss the claims at first, but as more details emerged, her composure began to crack in small telling ways. By the end of the session, the council had voted to strip the matron of her authority and place her under formal investigation. It was not a dramatic ending, filled with shouting or open conflict. It was quiet, controlled, and far more effective because of it. Afterward, as the council chamber slowly emptied, the Queen turned to me with an expression I had not seen from her before, something close to genuine gratitude. "You did not simply protect my body," she said. "You protected my rule." "That is the job," I said. "No," she said. "The job was only ever meant to be a joke. What you have shown me these past days is something else entirely." I did not know how to respond to that, so I said nothing, and she seemed to understand. In the weeks that followed, my role within the court slowly began to change. Other members of the Hive, once amused by my presence, started approaching me with quiet questions about human training methods, about how someone with no natural claws, no natural armor, and no enhanced strength could consistently anticipate danger before anyone else in the room noticed it. I explained, as simply as I could, that our species had learned to survive not through raw power, but through awareness, adaptability, and the ability to remain calm when everything around us fell into chaos. We were not the strongest species in the galaxy, and we never would be. But we had learned, generation after generation, how to notice what others missed, and how to act decisively the moment it mattered most. The Queen eventually stopped introducing me as her guest entirely. Instead, when foreign dignitaries visited the station, she introduced me simply as her most trusted advisor on matters of security. A title far removed from where I had started, cleaning pipes in a forgotten corner of the station just weeks earlier. I often thought back to that first night, to the laughter that had filled the throne room when she chose me, to how certain everyone had been that it was nothing more than a cruel joke aimed at both of us. I understood now that the laughter itself had been part of the plan, even if she had not fully realized it at the time. Nobody prepares for a threat they do not respect. Nobody guards carefully against an insult. The Queen had gambled on the idea that being underestimated could become a weapon. She had been right, though not in the way she originally intended. What began as a way to mock her enemies had become something far more valuable, a genuine partnership built on trust that neither of us had expected. Late one evening, as the station drifted quietly above a distant, glowing planet, the Queen found me standing near the observation deck, watching the stars in silence. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "The joke that brought you here?" I turned to look at her, considering the question carefully before answering. "No," I said, "because in the end, it was never really a joke at all." She said nothing more, simply standing beside me in comfortable silence, as the station moved steadily through the quiet dark of space, carrying both of us forward into whatever challenges waited next, together.